Okay. Can you see it from there?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. All right. So thank you for everybody joining us on the recording as well. We'll go ahead and get started. So a couple housekeeping items. Hopefully everybody's been going through data sets more and more. We're only a couple weeks away from announcing the actual competition. So yeah, we need to start collecting data sets. If you haven't been doing work, now's a great time to do that, to start getting those things collected and up to the site. Sorry. We're going to send around a survey to everyone in the newsletter. That'll probably go out today, or it may go out in the newsletter on Monday. But the survey basically is just going to ask for people to do the same thing as the abstract sessions that we suggested before, but this is more general for all the public. So we want you to pass this survey link around to everyone. You know, whether this is public, whether this is school kids, whether this is anybody, completely ask everyone what they would do about air quality. These are very simple questions. They're just, you know, free form. What would you look at? And this just gives us ideas about the rules and the competition and gives us ideas for things to work on. It doesn't have to be formal. It's just a simple survey link. All we ask is for email at the end if they want to be entered for a prize, but otherwise it can be completely anonymous. Okay? Did we want to announce dates on the actual competition?
At least the week of.
The week of the 18th? No, the 20th. The 18th. The week of August the 18th is when the competition is going to kick off. Okay, we will have a specific dates as soon as we come up with all of those exact things, but the week of the 18th will be when it kicks off. So if you think about it, it'll have to be turned in somewhere around, I think we said the October 1st, the first week of October. So you've got right there about 1 month essentially to compete on the data. So it's a very crunch time frame of getting that together. You should start working on trying to collect teams from other people right now. Okay, you should start working with other people. You should start thinking about that. You should be doing those things right now as you're here today and in the next couple of weeks.
That week of the 18th, when we say kickoff, that's when we're going to be announcing rules, guidelines, everything else. Officially, it'll be that last week in August. But
yeah, 25th.
I'm sure some people will start working a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Basically, once the rules are announced, I mean, we're going to say officially start at this time, but once the rules are announced, you can kind of start at that point.
We'll have about a week to ingest the data into some really cool tools that we have that we're still holding back on the details of, but very, very neat. So we'll have about a week to do that, and then you'll have a full month of access where you can hopefully do some pretty impressive things.
And then abstract submissions on the forums. If you go to the Big Data Utah site, scroll to the right, isn't it? No, it's down towards the bottom. The abstract submissions form, we need more abstracts. We only have 4 or 5 ideas of what people want to work on. That's why we're sending out the survey as well. But we need more ideas of what you're going to work on. Again, even if you think this is your super secret thing you're going to work on in the team, share it with everybody else because you're going to work on those as teams. Yes, Tyler?
Is there a link to the abstracts on the website?
There's a link to the, I believe the Google Doc to get to the ones that have been submitted is open, but I don't believe that I have a link directly to the responses. If you'd like to see it, I'd be more than happy to share it.
Just to the forum, because I never saw an email.
To the form comes, if you go back to bigdatautah.org, it's buried, unfortunately. It's the one link that we need to fix that I need to put on the right, and I haven't done that. It's right there. It says link. No, that's the data set submission. Go down. No, we have the abstracts right now. Go up. To the right. There's no right?
Oh, it's too small.
Oh.
Normally you'd see a group of
You'd
links.
see a group of links, and it might be over there. If not, I will post it again to the UHUG Google group. I'll post it again to the comments, a few other places, and then we'll make sure we get it up on the site as well.
Okay.
It should be on the right-hand side, but I'll make sure that everybody has it. It was definitely sent out in a newsletter for sure, because we've got a few submissions. We just haven't got enough. So, okay.
Maybe that's because the link is impossible to find. So,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's probably true. No, those are all the data links to the JIR tickets. Okay, my last one, and then if Nate has anything else too, I wanted to give out another gift card today to Archie and Jenny because they submitted more data sets than anyone else.
Thank you, guys.
iTunes? Oh, yeah, correct. Movie, but then you both have to have a UG sticker as well. That's since they're sponsored. Okay, so, and as I said, I still have more of these. I'll keep giving them out week after, for different things that people do to help us out. But definitely get to those data sets right now is the biggest thing. So, okay, did you have anything else to add?
No, I guess I've maybe. Now's the time to invite as many people as you possibly can to get involved. We'll start announcing advisory board members that we have, judges panels, all sorts of information. It's going to be really cool and really valuable for people to see over the next couple of weeks. So get them out. The more people that are involved, the better it'll be for all of us.
Oh, probably another good one, a whole new UTA data set. We just talked to them yesterday. Got a whole bunch of stuff from them. We're about to get a whole bunch of data sets from them, a lot of their data. So bus ridership information, all sort of things like that. A lot of fun stuff to look at related to air quality as well. So
you'll be able to see where every bus is every 10 seconds. So,
yeah, so that's all going to be available probably in the next 2 weeks. So, okay, let's let Alton go and go over anything else. What?
Go about 40 minutes.
Okay, about 40 minutes.
That work?
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. Great, thanks so much. So I'm pretty excited about this. So today my goal is just to demonstrate an approachable example of an end-to-end just analysis of what's going on here. And specifically, here's kind of my outline. I'm going to present the problem, talk about hypothesis, and show the data, how I collected it, and kind of cleansed it, and then a very simple analysis on that data. So the problem I'm working on here is, according to several sources, vehicle emissions are a major contributor to air quality. And for example, here in this 2013 article in the Salt Lake Tribune, they claimed that 57% of the PM 2.5 was an eventual resultant of emissions from vehicles, either directly or precursors, like gases that react with other things in the air.
Alton, can you speak up a little?
Of course. So part of what I want to do here is I want to validate some of these claims, and I want to see if we have the ability to look at traffic data and vehicles and correlate those to air quality, right? So as far as air quality, just raise your hands real quick. How many of you had a chance to look at the EPA data and what they have? Right, great. So, so you already know that there's several gases that they collect across the country, and as well as other, air quality related things. So I kind of just summarized in here some details, and this document will be available to read later. But basically, my hypothesis is, can we find a correlation between traffic on the freeway and nearby measuring sites? So there's several measuring sites in Utah. If you haven't had a chance, this article that I'm referencing actually is a pretty good summary of what we're talking about, less than 6 months ago. Okay, maybe not 10 months, I guess. But they, let's see if I saw that link open. They gave this, so each one of these is one of the monitoring sites that the EPA has data on. But if you've played around with the data set already, you already know that not every site collects every measurement. And they don't collect them all at the same frequency or granularity, right? But there are some that I'm particularly interested in that are especially close to the freeway. And so let me just show you kind of what I did and walk you through this thought process, because I think that it, regardless of what tool you use, it can translate to your problem, hopefully. Okay, so the first thing I did was I collected the metadata. So using the EPA's website, I downloaded just the annual summary for 2014, just this year, all the data points that they've collected at every location, and it kind of just shows an aggregate. Here, let's just take a look at that real quick. So I put several of these data sets out on GitHub, as well as all this code. So if you want to find it, you can just go to GitHub and just search for Utah air quality. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Utah air quality. And in here, it has some of the smaller data sets that I use for lookup, but also some of of course, the code that I ran. So let's take a look at that data set real quick, just so that we can all be on the same page and we can approach it. So the EPA has annual data, and let me open this on this tiny screen. Of course, this has data across the country, like I said, so we don't need all of it, but what's neat about this is that it just shows the latitude and longitude of every location, what parameter, and the sample duration, as well as just some summary statistics, right? Just like averages and means for the year, right? So what I'm getting at this is I just want to know where do we have samples of the data, and which ones am I curious about that I'll eventually want to pull for and correlate with traffic data. So I take that same data set, and here I just give examples in R where I load it, and I filter down to Utah and just the counties that I'm interested in. I'm doing this because these are the only counties that I have traffic data from the PEMS data set and UDOT. And so here, for example, is again that data set, and then if I just look at the unique locations and summarize them by location, I can see that in Bountiful, they have some 251 measurements at that site. Salt Lake at Hawthorne has 93 different measurements, including not just different metrics, but also different granularities, like daily, min, max, hourly sometimes, and so forth. So now that I have all those locations, I wanted to just get the parameter names, the actual measurements. So for example, they're testing for all these different chemicals in the air, or byproducts of air quality, or contributors to air quality. And that in and of itself is very interesting. But what I did was, for this case, I just take that data set and I'm just looking for locations that are sampling nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and PM 2.5. And now when I look at those by granularity, for example, for 1 hour, I can see that Bountiful doesn't measure carbon monoxide hourly, but Hawthorne does. Hawthorne also has 2 measurements related to nitrogen dioxide hourly. So given this, I actually am just focusing on these 3 locations: Hawthorne, North Provo, and Ogden for now, right? And because not only are they close to the freeway, but they also sample it at the hour. Even though for today's, I'm just going to do the daily averages. So all this is kind of just data prep, just getting a feel for what we have and what's available, right? So here I'm just sampling hourly, and then I take all the unique locations, the air quality stations. Can you see that very well? Yeah. and unique locations, meaning their name and their latitude and longitude. So, so I actually list those down below. Hang on, let's just go to them. So for example, here's all the sites, Hawthorne, Provo, Ogden, and their exact, or roughly their latitude and longitude of those sites. So now that I have that, the next step is to get data out of the pems data set, or out of the pems website. So has anybody played around with this or seen it or anybody talking about it yet? Okay, so let's just take a look real quick. Oh boy, that's embarrassing. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So let's just try it right here. The u.pems. So they've made publicly accessible a real-time data feed as well as historic data service if you apply for an account. And I got my account like the next day, so it seems reasonable that everybody could probably do it.
If you put in the comments here with the air quality competition, you can get it very quickly. They're looking for those, so it's not
okay. So once you get your credentials and you can log in, one of the first things I started doing just to explore this on my own was I took a look at all the inventory, every location where they sample data. So each one of these is a site on the freeway where they measure different things. If we zoom in here to one of these, I can click on this one, for example. Each site, or each measurement station belongs to a controller, and then here's the station ID. So when I look at this particular station, which is at North Temple-ish and 800 South, I guess. So here's an on-ramp, and then here's the lanes of traffic. So, so that's cool. So you can see the data there. Now, if you want to look at some metrics that they're monitoring at these locations across each lane, then you can go in here, I think. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Let's try this. No. Okay, let's try. Oh, you know what it might be is this one might not have. That one might not have measurements. Okay, let's just take a look at one here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, we need to click here on aggregates. So for this particular spot on 1700 South, similarly, you can see across all the lanes of traffic, and then up here they give you these options where you can select, sub-select the data set. So for example, maybe I don't want to look at the aggregate, and maybe I want to go back. Maybe I want to go back to like January, and I want to look at a daily feed. But if I draw this plot now, let's just zoom out for you. Oh, sorry. So now it aggregated it because it's a daily average, and you can see this, this distinct weekly pattern where during weekdays there's a lot more. In this case, it's plotting quantity. Oh, it's plotting flow. The flow of traffic, which is the number of vehicles divided by the time period. So, okay, so that's great. So they give you this nice little interface, and then you can click on this button and you can export the text. But that's that's fine and dandy if you want to poke at the data, but what we really want to do is, once we've identified the metric that we want, then we just want to get it all. And they've also been generous about offering the raw data if we want that too, but this might be just as efficient to hone in on what we want. So let me show you what I did. And please stop me if there's any questions, actually. This should be as much of a learning experience for me as it is for you. So now that I have, now that we've been able to kind of see what that PEMS data set looks like and that, and what DOT has to offer, what we really want to do is we want to identify all of those stations that are near, all those traffic monitoring stations that are near one of my air quality monitoring stations. So to do that, here I just give some sample code where I basically am reading in another table, a lookup table that has the every traffic station with its corresponding ID, right? That's what I clicked on. And oh yeah, I'm forgetting this code. So what we also need is hang on. There we go. This is the one I need. So I also have this lookup that says for every one of those traffic stations, or every single state PM, I guess that's like a mile marker type thing, and every county, here's the latitude and longitude, because they don't actually give the latitude and longitude in this data set. So what I have to do is merge that with every one of those traffic stations. And I'm going to make that available, right, for everybody. So now we have this data set that has every traffic station and its corresponding latitude and longitude, right? So then I can just go through and I just compute the nearest ones to this one site. In this case, I'm just looking at Hawthorne, right there in Salt Lake, right here, anyways. And I end up getting every location sorted by how far they are to, here we go, every ID for each traffic monitoring station sorted by how close it is to Hawthorne. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I've kind of subdivided this problem, and really honed in, but of course you would just put this in some loop, and we're going to discuss that later. But so now that I have these nearby ones, right? Remember, my hypothesis is that the traffic at nearby locations should show up as significantly correlated to air quality at those related measurement stations. So now that I have those, of course, I don't want to just go peck at the website. What I want to do is I want to programmatically extract the data. So I'll go ahead and just demonstrate this real quick. This isn't exactly how you would do it either, but it's a good step forward. So what I have here is an IPython notebook, which has Python code in it, and I've installed the package Selenium, which lets you programmatically navigate a web browser. So, for example, what this code right here is doing, I can just execute it actually, is it's going to load the Firefox browser and then navigate to this website. Okay, so it did somewhere. It's not cool unless you can see it, I guess. Okay, here we go. So it navigated on its own to this. Well, I mean, I told it to go to this. So now I have to log in, which you could also program. Okay, so now that I'm logged in, and since it's still running, being controlled by Python, then what I can do is simply do something like this, where I define all the stations that I want based on what I just found, right? The nearest ones to the sites. And in this case, you might list them out, or however you want to do this. That's pretty trivial. And then here I'm just taking that first one, and I'm going to go download the data. And what's convenient is you don't actually have to program it to fill out that form, because they just do a get, and you have all the parameters here in the URL string. So all I have to do is, once I've decided what granularity of data that I want, in this case it's aggregated daily between these dates, all I have to do is pass in that station ID and then navigate to that page, and then save it out. So similarly, you would do something like this to ingest all that data into Hadoop or into, it's well structured, so you can put it into MySQL or anything, right? Or just CSV files like I'm doing.
So Al,
Yeah.
are you just using the Selenium piece just so you can get through that login part, so you can keep running these scripts?
Yeah, exactly, because I'm just going to pound it. Gently,
Gently, please.
So, oh yeah, so let's see, just so that you can see that this is nothing fancy. So here is where the data is going to be stored. So if I execute my code, and of course you'd wrap this in a for loop or whatever, and I get, in this case I'm just getting those two sites and the data I've described, then here they've loaded for me, and they're ready to be ETL'd into your next process. But that's not what I wanted to focus on today. So obviously we're looking at a very small data set, but I wanted to just get end to end, right? But you can see how this would be one of the pieces that you would scale. Okay. So, oh, and there it is, navigating. Okay, so let's close out that. So, dang. Okay, give me a second.
Is the Python notebook you're using as well, is that open source?
Oh yeah, that's easy. Oh, the Python, IPython, yeah, is open source. Yeah. In fact, IPython is super easy to install if you want to use Anaconda, which is provided by, it's a compiled and ready to go on many distributions by those guys at Continuum. Okay, so, okay, let me load this back up because I accidentally closed it. Okay, so now we have, we've already seen how to programmatically get the EPA data, right, which is pretty straightforward. Since there's no login or anything, you can just download those zip files like they showed last week. And now that I've shown that you can get the data nearby those, the data related to traffic and anything else you can get from pems programmatically. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of stitch it together and show a very basic next step. So what we have here is not the right thing. Okay, let's jump back to where we were. Okay, so great. So the next step, now in this case, I'm just loading those two data sets I've described into memory. They're just daily for one site, Hawthorne, and then these two nearby traffic stations on the freeway. And I can quickly look at some data exploration and see, for example, at Hawthorne, here's what one of those metrics looks like. I can't remember which one it is, but it's just for this year, right? On daily. And then similarly, we can look at that station and we can see something like what's the flow of traffic by day. Again, so I mean, if I connected the dots, you'd see the weekly pattern, but this is probably like Sunday or something. There's just not as many people on the road. And then it's pretty simple, just to merge, since we're all at the day granularity, then we can just see all the data combined. And in this case, I'm anticipating that I'm going to be ingesting the data into Spark and doing the manipulation there, and eventually doing the machine learning there. So here I just do something similar where I'm just doing a linear fit, a linear model on the mean of the metric that I'm monitoring daily, as a function of the number of vehicles that day on the road. And then I'm plotting those. And like my hypothesis at the beginning, what I wanted to do was just see if I could have a real quick early win to, if there's more cars on the road, then you'd expect more pollution. And here's the result. Yeah, so it slightly increases. I ran the p-value though, and it's not significant. So of course, you know, the statistical language that fails to reject the null hypothesis. So it's not like there's no correlation, but this particular, I wasn't able to find correlation with the number of vehicles at these sites and this metric. But that's where there's good news, right? Because there's so much more data left. So these are the questions and the next steps that we can discuss, or maybe even do some of this live if you want, because I honestly burned through this pretty quick. So one of the next steps is what I'm seeing consistent, right? Can I just start by looking at all of those locations, not just the first two closest ones, but maybe like the first, you know, whatever nearby in some radius. And that you hopefully can see how that would be pretty straightforward. Also, what about, is there some kind of delayed response or within day, right? And that's where it's neat, because we also have all the hourly data. Not only do we have it, I mean, we have both data sets, right? So on an hourly basis, I should be able to see, you know, the pollutants increase as traffic or whatever happens throughout the day. And then of course, you know, we don't live in a flat world or anything, but there's hundreds of factors that contribute to climate, right? And so ultimately, the final model is going to include different things like, you know, distance to it, of course. Things like what's the weather on that day? You know, was it rainy? So, you know, maybe some of the pollutants didn't get, you know, maybe there was just a different response. And then, of course, not only that, but what other contributors? Not just the number of vehicles on the road, but is there something about it like? Oh, I guess I talked about that here. Is there a specific pattern or behavior that could be avoided, like rush hour or congestion, delays or major accidents? And then the holy grail would be to tie this into something like, what's the ultimate impact on human life, like asthma or other conditions, right? If we can find that specific patterns or behaviors in traffic directly are a function of or contribute to air quality, then what about air quality and its relationship with our health? And then tie those all back together and maybe paint some story that says, you know, look, if you don't drive during rush hour, then you're helping save so many lives or something.
So, how far is Hawthorne from the freeway? Is Rose Park actually closer?
It's a good question.
It's like 2 blocks.
It's 2 blocks.
Well, it's 6 blocks.
Uh,
Yeah.
Then does anybody know where the Rose Park Elementary is? It's probably not as close as 2 blocks, right?
Did Rose Park have,
They do.
they have the same measurements, right?
Oh, I don't know how many.
Yeah, I don't think so. At least not on the hourly. Oh. Gosh, this resolution is awful too. Everybody should have the experience of presenting on this because it. So,
Yeah, pretty close.
yeah, so of course in this case, it's not just I-15, right? I have the data set here for I-80, right? So it's kind of just right in that corner. And then of course now that we have bus data, right, or several other things that we're going to be able to include in kind of this holistic model of pollutants from vehicles.
How long would it take to do a live one on the hourly?
I don't know, we could try it.
Want to try it real quick and see?
Yeah.
If you have any way of taking into account for air movement, when there's a storm comes through, there's
Yeah.
no pollutants.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And some of those key metrics, the EPA has in their clean data sets. But those would be factors, yeah, that you want to include, definitely.
We've got all the Meso-West data that the team could make sure it's in there and everything too, right?
And then
Storms.
I wonder if there's a way to calculate the total weight volume of pollutants that's put out.
Exactly, yeah. If you could identify other sources and then kind of, yeah, exactly, divide.
Do we have exactly what pollutants are being found?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, no, not exactly, but you saw that big list of things that they're measuring. I'd assume that those are
That's what's
a pretty comprehensive list of what's important.
Which ones are heavier than air and which ones are not? The ones that are heavier in air are going to be on the population.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, and then you'll want to know things like what's the elevation or the topology of the, the space.
I'm going to try and get data from Kennecott, and they have something called the cold pool effect, where they actually have inversions inside of the mine.
Yeah.
And so now you can see some differences. Some of it is going to create some false positives, but for the most part, it might be a cool thing to see the differences between the two.
I wonder if you could actually create a heat map, for.
Yeah, exactly, and interpolate in between them. Yes, exactly. And yeah, and I think they have some of that, or there's been work on that, but you could improve those, definitely.
So,
There was a number of pollution indicators that were finding, like, I think over 100.
Yeah.
How many of those are related to emissions from cars?
Oh, how many? I don't know.
Good question.
But I tried to do a little bit of that.
that's an excellent question also to put on one of the comments of the ticket or in the Google group, and we can run that over to the UDOT command center, and they'll tell us which one is related to what. Because remember, if you see something in PEMS or in the other data that Alton's talking about, just comment on the ticket and say, I need to understand what this is. We'll get to the source of whoever provided it and then find out what that is. That's why on all of the links, all the tickets and everything, that's kind of where it came from, so we can always go back and ask those questions. Because none of us are going to know these things perfectly. We're not air quality experts.
Sure.
That'd be good to have kind of a legend.
Yeah,
Sources
well, and
sources.
that's, yeah, you got to define the metadata as you go. And so when someone has a question, we need to go back to that source and say, help us define this, and then we'll put it in the ticket and everybody can benefit. So Alton, on this data too, you kind of mentioned you had the key of all the locations and their information. Is that what you're planning also to publish as a data set so everyone can start to merge that?
Yeah.
Because like you said, it sounds like you've got that focal point, but then you can just keep tacking on other sources as we get bus, as we get Meso-West, as we get. And so, yeah, we should publish that as one core piece, and then everybody can keep building onto it in different places.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So does the PEMS data set, do they just track the number of cars Flow of traffic, or what other measurements do they use?
Yeah, they
Like,
do.
temperature, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like,
Yeah.
do they track speed of cars?
Yeah, they do.
See if there's congestion.
They do. The PEMS data set, and there again, that's one where they have worked really closely with us and they're happy to give us more. There's a lot of the information is on the website, but also they use that basically to tell when there's accidents, when there's things going on, when there's issues. And then there's other applications linked to that same data as well. So we can get an answer from them. But I'm sure they do speed.
I notice there's like lots of little apps about, I'm curious if they have APIs that can make it pull out their data. They're not always very accurate, I've noticed, but.
So these traffic ones, there is PEMS, but it actually belongs to someone that writes a traffic. So it's we can actually take, this is the only way we can get to it, in other words, if that makes sense. If you do find other open APIs, please publish them and let us know. We'll look into it. But I know that this is the best way to get to this data.
And maybe those apps are just using this one.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the reason we can't take all of this, you see where it says IDERIS up there at the top, someone else wrote PEMS. It was an outside consultant, so that's why it's that way. But like RIUTA does have an API, and that is what they're looking for us to use.
Okay.
And so they will probably give us an API and say, here it is, and this is how you can get the data. And then you can use it directly from there.
It's cool that they have truck proportions and things like that.
Yeah, the PEMS data set's really, really rich is the best way I would put it. It's got a lot of data in there.
Be interesting to watch speed and how that changes the output and everything else.
This queue, I think, is some sort of efficiency of that lane.
So if you had time, can you actually run all of those factors?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All of them to.
Oh yeah.
That's probably the way to really.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why you wanted to do this programmatically, so you're not like downloading every table. But I mean, we could go ahead and make this interactive for the next 20 minutes and try getting the hourly, if that's what we want to do.
If you guys have questions, since we're almost at 1 o'clock, if people have questions that you'd like answered in case people need to take off here in 5-10 minutes.
Do you have any health-related data, like from hospitals and stuff?
Yeah, so we have UAH data that we're getting. We've got IHC data that we're trying to get as well. We're working with the University of Utah. I don't know what we'll see in time. If anybody has any access or any way for us to start trying to figure out how to get some clinical data, that'd be really helpful. Because asthma only goes to the hospital when it's a pretty serious issue, right?
Yeah.
So,
and the best thing we found online so far, some people have submitted the CDC data about asthma. So there's some aggregates about asthma by county. I know I've seen those come in. So some of those are available, but do we have ER visits and hospital visits and hospital exits? Not yet. We're trying very hard to get that. Obviously, because of HIPAA and other things like that, that's the last thing anybody's going to give us. So yeah, some
Intermountain Allergy
and all too.
Do you have any data from Intermountain Allergy? They track a time of air quality as well.
I don't think it really is.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody over to you talking to Intermountain Allergy? Because they track, I mean, it's not pollution, but it has the air quality.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, that would be great. One of the causes that we're looking at in air quality is natural vegetation and things along those lines. So allergy would help us take out some of that other particulates, or add it in depending on what somebody's looking at.
We've already had some.
things like Rob had mentioned that there's some concerns where sometimes things are a little bit inaccurate. One, that's a great potential piece of a project that you're working on, trying to have them be more accurate. But two, keep it in mind as you're trying to get to end results of whatever sort. Like the EPA Air Now data, John might know a little bit more about this, but that data has a lot of potential flaws where you could look like you have air that's just as bad out in, right next to Nevada as you do all the way across the state. So some of the stuff that John has given us will kind of help out with some of that. So.
Do we have other transportation sources like air flights and freight and trains?
We just added FAA 2 nights ago. It's number 50, I think, on the list. Like I said, I add these, every couple days, really, or whenever I can get to them as quickly as possible. But you got to keep looking at the JARA tickets to see what else has been added. We're up to 50 of them now, so you really need to go through them and see what they say as which ones are which.
How about trains? Do you think we can get a hold of?
We'll have UTA data. I wonder if DOT tracks other trains or not.
I don't know if it would be in PEMS or not. We'd have to ask.
Are these like one-time feeds? So updates have to be requested?
It depends. I mean, a lot of the feeds we're trying to get as much historical data as possible, and then if we requested it, say in June, we wouldn't get it again, but none of them have been dumped from their database that get us. This has all been websites that they can access in that
So
data.
it's live data.
Yeah. And a lot of these, some of these, again, like the UTA, they have one, their API connects to one that's 10 seconds of where the buses are all the time, but they only have 3 to 6 months inside there. So we're working on the historical aspect of that correctly.
And how much of these links of this data is applicable to other cities? Do you think as much of it?
Not much. There's some nationals, the CDC, things like that, they all have nationals, but otherwise,
It's all local.
yeah, we've been trying to focus just on Utah.
We want to focus on Utah for the end results, but it would be good to look at other states for comparison and contrast. Everything else, right?
Yeah, that was one of the abstracts someone submitted was a comparison, and that's an option too. So has anybody grabbed this one too yet, the zips of all those zips? I know that Tyler kind of went over it last week, or did Ben go over it? I can't remember. But I don't know if anybody pulled all of these in yet, submitted them. It'd be interesting to see. Because those are all sitting there waiting to be pulled out.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be a good time for another quick plug on help, right? If you get a chance, go out there, look at the 50 different data sets that are up there. There might be, we've done stuff like it many times. There are a couple that are just PDF files that we just need to transfer over. But we need those data sets as clean as possible so that we can have them available for everybody in the next 3 weeks.
And even if it's just going through the JARA tickets, and then if you spend 30 minutes looking at one of the sets or the site or something, comment what you found. Comment the direction you want to go. Use it as your own personal journal in the comments or something. That's going to help someone else in the future. If you comment on that ticket, you say, I did this, this, and this, and I finally got to this stage, well, then that's great. That the next person can come right where you left off or benefit. So don't be afraid to comment, that's for sure.
Plus, there are gift cards available.
Exactly. I gotta do the next one for most comments, I think. I just got already query in JARA to find it.
I submitted a comment on the EPA data the other day, but hadn't heard back. I had written a simple Python just to filter out to Utah data. I wasn't sure where to put it or where,
Okay, so if you get the data down, in other words, you store it down to your box or somewhere, S3, whatever, to store a file, then you go to the actual data set submission link. That was the one that was on the front page that said link, yeah. And you put it into there and you say, here's the file, and then you put it in, and then I upload it to the OpenCity data set. Did you put in that
This was
submission?
on my local. My question was, do you have a place where I can upload it?
What happens is as soon as you submit that and you say, there's a little thing that says source file, and you say it's on my local, then I will email you back and say, how can we get this? Here's my Dropbox, here's an FTP, here's something for us to share it, and we'll work with it.
A few days ago.
You what?
I
You didn't submit that?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to look for that. I thought I went through all those.
There's a slight chance that we get a lot of these.
Sure.
Sorry.
There's a slight chance I'm behind, is what he's trying to say. He's trying to say I don't get my work done.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for
I didn't see any
submitting.
other obvious.
And if nothing else, keep doing that. You know, keep doing those. I will get to them as quickly as humanly possible, and we'll keep that process. The only reason I'm playing bottleneck and doing that is we don't want multiples to go up to the Open Civic site. We don't want duplicates to accidentally get up. We're trying to make sure that we filter so that there's no duplicates going up there.
Sure.
Did you get mine data set? I mean, I sent it to you and Nick.
Yeah, you sent us an email directly, which I need to go back and find. The form in the future, because I'm using the form as kind of my task list of what I need to get done on that list. So, but I got to it because it was in instead of in the forms. So, yes, by all means, you can ask us questions, but please use the form. It's my task list of things to get done. So, it makes when I put a position, I won't necessarily email the person back. I'll actually close the JIRA ticket. It's closed, and I'll start to see who actually has completed JIRA tickets. Does that make sense? Okay, you've been
Yeah,
quiet.
so
What do you work
while we were talking, I went ahead and just downloaded those 2 hourly data sets, just kind of manually. And then, and now what I did is I just filtered the data for just the site that I care about. So, so if this is true, then no.
And you're just using R to do the analysis?
Yeah, just to kind of explore it. Yeah, R isn't necessarily the most efficient tool, but it's in my toolkit.
It's the one you know best.
Yeah, and yeah, and I don't know what it would take to load a data set like this in like Excel or something else, but ideally you would probably put it into a database and then just do SQL or some other type of process on it where it's already indexed. So that's correctly, I have in data, I have all these columns, and there should be a site name, not state name, like a, you guys seen it? And that's why it didn't work. Local, okay. No. So, so it looks like the hourly, hang on, the daily aggregate has a different column identifier. So how do I get that? Let's see. I want, and I have latitude. yeah, feel free to stop me if you have questions or if this is totally boring. So what I'm going to do is for that location, I'm getting the latitude and longitude. So there's the latitude and then the long. So now I should be able to look at that. Let's call this another data set. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter the data where data lat is equal to test latitude. Okay, so that seemed to have done something, but it's also let's also enforce that I'm looking at the longitude. Okay, so what I'm getting here is I'm getting the hourly samples at the Hawthorne location. So yeah, it's in Salt Lake. So just for some reason they didn't label it as Hawthorne. Maybe because, you know, it took too much space and it, you know, just to save space. You know, why have all these extra parameters? So in this case, it's observing nitrogen dioxide, and oh, we're gonna have a time issue. Okay, yeah. Okay. So now hourly samples for this year.
And while he's doing that, do you want to mention? Do you want to throw out real quick the stuff we took out?
Yeah.
The surprise?
Oh,
Shouldn't have had you do it earlier, sorry.
so with this data competition, a lot of competition.
Yeah,
I'm assuming stuff.
you should come up closer though so the mic can hear you.
Okay. So with this competition, a lot of the competitive edge or the value comes from the data munging and what you do with the data. The person that wins this will probably have some clever data munging or impressive interpolation techniques that they use on the data to win. So we're kicking off a mini competition which will just be focused on prediction. So the input data set is structured, no tags, nothing special, no data validity issues, so you'll have a structured data set and prediction output. We have $2,000 guaranteed for the competition, and we're waiting to hear back for a few sponsors. We'd like to price up to $5,000, and it's to have a short turnaround time.
We meaning who?
Me meaning some personal contacts. I've reached out to other people. My employer is also reaching out at the executive level to try to get engagement. And this data set will not require distributed computing. You can work on your own laptop. So it'll be more about machine learning, cleverness. So we'll have an announcement next week with more details. But if anyone wants to be involved on the sponsor side, reach out to me or Nick or Pat, and it should be good.
Thanks, Ben. Sorry to do that late and not even understand.
It's on the recording now too, so others can hear it. So. And we'll mention it in the newsletter next week.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data munging on this one. So, especially on a tiny screen. So now I think I've got that other data set pretty straightened up. What we have here is the hourly samples of traffic flow in each lane and the total by hour at a nearby site. So
We're going to aggregate over the lanes.
Yeah.
The lanes are really wide.
Yeah, so here it's already aggregated for us. So it's the total, it should be anyways. Let's, yeah, let's, I don't know, let's just. Screen is so tiny. Okay. Okay, let's just look at the first one. So, for example, for this one, here's the total number of cars in that hour, and here's all the lanes. Oh, it looks like maybe one. No, so there's 100% observed, or 100% uptime, I think. Yeah, I really don't know this data set, but this is good. So we have up here our date time. Jeepers. Kind of. Yeah, this might be better for me just to kind of record this and then rebroadcast. You know, do a little thing. There really is. Yeah, there's just a lot of subtle like data munging things you have to do.
I think that's one of the key things that we're getting at here is as we start to put these things together, to start to try to correlate them together, the better we can have them defined and cleaned, the better that's going to be. Because you know, you just pulled that off the web, pulled it down, and there's lots of little issues between the two, getting these two to work together.
The whole workflow.
Yeah. So.
I wonder how granular it gets if they're able to show the difference between trucks and some of the other things. It actually gets pretty.
Remember the UTA was mentioning they have a vehicle type. And I bet you that UDOT and the others too, they go by some sort of vehicle type. And then we need the metadata about the vehicle types.
So they doing that by sensors that pick up weight, or are these just the sensors that pick up what's passing? How quickly it passes?
I would imagine weight would be my guess. They must categorize it by weight.
I guess the idea there is that the larger the vehicle, the bigger the emissions.
Right.
Yeah, or are those larger vehicles more efficient, you know? Or something?
Right, the fuel economy, and the larger ones are typically diesel, and they might throw off a different set of toxins.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there are certain cancers that are caused by diesel. On the other hand, a lot of diesel emissions are heavier, and therefore they fall to the ground before. Right. You know, I mean, there's so many other factors.
When it's like these sensors are far enough away that stuff could fall into the ground before it gets.
Right. Or wind up and above, where those sensors are able to gather. Or wind patterns that go away. So there's balloon sensors from Mesowest.
There was balloon data, yeah. Okay. Some balloon data too around that.
That'd be interesting.
Yes, I just saw one come in. No, somebody just sent in a balloon data from the airport, I believe, that they've been launching balloons out there for a long time. And there's a piece of that as well.
Matt talked about that in the West too.
Maybe it was related to his lane. I think it's a different set in one of the JIRA tickets, though. I'm pretty sure that one of the JIRA tickets is balloon data from the airport going up. So, but you're right. He mentioned they have balloons also to tell what the level of the inversion is based on the data. Yeah,
and all that stuff.
Yeah, maybe that it was his data set. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I can keep chugging away at this forever.
Report back. It's your homework. We expect you to have it next week.
But
by that it means Monday morning.
Yeah, those of you who are left. Hopefully this was helpful just to kind of break it down into kind of the tiniest building block, but end to end. And the feedback was helpful.
Yeah, great workflow. And will you plan to share the text document you were working off of?
Yeah, it's out there. Yeah, it's on GitHub, and I'll pass around the link.
Yeah, send me the link so I can put it onto this video.
Yeah, I'll probably even